crafters, and welcome back. This is Deepa from DeeZinesByD, and I have another Scrappy Tails post for you. So this one is all about autumn and fall, and I know the weather is not that cool yet, but fall is coming. So I decided to use the beautiful fall leaves dies that come with the last Scrappy Tail release, and I'm actually going to use them for a faux watercolor technique doing stamping. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we're using. I have the Wild Sunflowers stamp set, and for this I'm really just using it for the sentiments. And here is the Fall Leaves die set. Now I'm going to be using these dies to create stamps, and all you're going to need is some acrylic blocks and fun foam. So first of all, my fun foam. This is pink. You can use whatever color. This is just some craft fun foam that I got off of Amazon. I think it wasn't that expensive at all. You just need any type of foam, and with the dies, it'll work perfectly. So I've gone ahead and taken the dies that I want to use. There are a bunch of dies that are veins. You do not need those. And then I also have these other little foliage pieces that I'm actually going to use to die cut later on. So I put those aside. So I'm taking my fun foam and I'm putting all of these leaf dies on top of the fun foam. And all I have to do is kind of put it through my die cutting machine and cut those out. Now, do keep in mind when you cut them out, they will get a little flat at first. That's not a big deal. They will kind of bounce back to their foamy depth, and then you can use them for stamping without having any issues. Now, I did kind of go back and forth, so I got a little bit of extra little bits on the end, so I just took all those off. It really doesn't matter. I've got all of my acrylic blocks here. And now I'm just attaching the foam pieces to the blocks. And all I'm using is some Tombow Mono removable adhesive. So it's important to use the removable adhesive. I think I've used this without, with like normal adhesive too, like tape runner, and it works fine. It shouldn't mess up your acrylic blocks. So what I'm doing, I'm using a whole slew of distress inks to basically add ink to my foam. And then after I've added like a couple inks to get a mix of colors like fall leaves are, I've got a little spray bottle and that just has some water in it. And I will add some of that water to the fun foam to get the colors moving around. And then I'll just stamp this on my cardstock. Now this cardstock panel is about 5 by 7 inches. So I'm making a bigger size card today. I made it bigger because in the end I will cut it down just a little bit to create a bit of a border. But all I'm really going to do here is carry on with this same technique. So I'm grabbing my acrylic block with the fun foam stamp. I'm adding my distress ink colors, and then I'm just spraying it with the mist of water and stamping it down on my paper. And I always stamp it twice because there's enough of that ink on the stamp to get 2 good impressions. And you can see just there that it really isn't that hard to clean off your stamp to add different colors. So I wouldn't really recommend using a stamp cleaner. I actually haven't done that yet. It probably wouldn't affect it too much, especially if it's for dye inks. But I'm just using the water and my towel to just wipe off the top of that foam stamp, and it comes off nice and easily. It doesn't really leave any bit of mess at all, and you can just add whatever color afterward without having any contamination. So I basically carried on like this with all of the little foam stamps that I created. I had enough acrylic blocks for all of these, but if you wanted to, you could stamp a couple of them and then switch them out to your acrylic blocks that you just used if you don't have enough. You could also put them in your MISTI and put them in a specific design and do them all in one go, or maybe 2 steps to get overlapping of your leaves. Another idea is, instead of doing the full watercolor technique like I am, is to actually just stamp them out. Now, I've used the fun foam stamps before, the DIY handmade stamps here, with your dies, and they stamp pretty well. So if you see there is one impression on the top left corner of a maple leaf that I didn't add enough water to, and you can see it pretty much stamped the ink down, and it takes, it basically, the impression is very good. It shows you all of the nooks and crannies of your die, and it actually turns out really nice. So that's another idea. You could probably try this without doing the full watercolor effect and just the stamping, and it would turn out equally, if not better, because the colors would be a bit more vibrant and less washed out from the watercolor effect. So I basically created a complete panel with this. I really didn't have to do the center of the panel. I could have stopped and left the center bare, but I wanted to do the entire thing to show you what it would look like in the end. And in the end, I actually took the little, there's little acorn pieces. There's these small little acorn dies, and I used the fun foam to cut that out to create a small acorn stamp. And I'm actually just going to stamp those directly all over the panel so that it stands out a little more on the leaves. Now I just wanted to show you here that it really is easy to clean off your acrylic blocks. All you have to do is remove the stamp, wipe it down, and then just rub off that adhesive that you had put on. It rolls right off and your acrylic blocks are as good as new and ready to go for your next project. So as I said, I've stamped out the little acorns here, and you can see it just adds a little extra something to the background. And now I'm actually taking my aged mahogany ink cube, and I'm just rubbing across the edges of my panel. And the reason for doing this is to kind of darken the edges and draw your eye into the center of the panel. Now you can actually see that once it dries, there's a bit of warping. So all I did was I put it through my die cutting machine with just the pads to flatten it out. Now moving on to that center sentiment panel, I'm actually using some Pinkbrush Studio nested hexagons here. And I'm just going to be foiling one, I think this is the second largest hexagon with some Spellbinders polished brass foil. And I'm foiling it on some Sizzix opulent cardstock that's in gold pearl. So this cardstock is really nice. It's nice and smooth, so it foils perfectly. And on top of it, it's got like a pearly gold sheen when you move the cardstock back and forth in the light. I'll go ahead and foil that and then cut it out with the coordinating nested dies to get a beautiful hexagon center panel. And so my little tip when foiling images like this or cutting out foiled images is to place your tape on your die and then the edge of the paper that's not touching the foil. Make sure your tape isn't over the foil, because sometimes I found when I do cut it out, when I lift the tape up, it can lift a little bit of the foil, and then that messes up your entire foiled image. So moving on to the actual sentiment, now I've got the Wild Sunflower stamp set, and I'm grabbing the From Our Home to Yours Happy Thanksgiving sentiment to stamp out in the center. I'll set that up in my MISTI and stamp it out with some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, and then on top of that, I'm going to add some clear Ranger embossing powder just to give it a little bit of a gloss and finished look. Now, I actually didn't use an anti-static powder tool here because, it's clear embossing powder and any stray pieces are not going to show up through ink blending or anything, so it is not too imperative in this case. Now, I'm going to move on to those extra dies that I put aside. So they're little branchy dies with little berry bits on them, and I love to include these to kind of just jazz up the design or kind of decorate the actual sentiment panel that's going to go on top and in the foreground. So I'm just cutting out the actual branch portion from some dark green cardstock, and then I'm going to cut out the berries for one branch from some gold glitter cardstock and from the other branch from some matte gold cardstock to create a variation in the different golds that we're using. Now, I didn't show it here, but I also cut out a couple of the oak. Is it the oak? I don't know. A couple of the smaller leaves from some gold metallic cardstock, and I added those with the branches just to create like a complete look on the front. Once we're finished, you'll see what that all looks like. So I like using my Sizzix Sidekick on my table for cutting out these small little images. It really comes in handy because I do have a big shot, and I find that it just stops me from having to get up and move around too much. And I'd say that's just mainly my laziness when I'm crafting, because I actually watch some shows and I probably don't want to get up and miss anything. So that sidekick really comes in handy. So let's go ahead and put this together. I've got these cute little branches and I'm adding the glitter gold cardstock to the little berry pieces. And it's pretty easy to figure out which berry goes where. It's not too hard. Even if you put one in the wrong spot, it's not really too noticeable. So I wouldn't worry too much. Just get those berries on there and you'll see how beautiful it looks when it's done. So I will just fast forward a little bit here. You do kind of have to press them down a bit, and that's just because of the glue that I'm using. I'm using Barely Arts glue, which is a liquid glue, but it tends to have a little bit longer drying time than other glues. It takes like maybe 5 seconds or so to become tacky compared to other glues is what I find. So now moving on to the other little piece, I'll go ahead and add those little matte gold bauble or berry pieces to the end. And once those are nice and done, that's the cute little look that they have. Now I'll move on to those leaves. So you can see I have one that I had actually stamped out and I cut it out. I've got a gold one that I cut out from gold metallic cardstock, and I also cut one out of that deep green cardstock just to add a bit of contrast in the colors. So now I'm cutting my card base. What I usually do for a 5 by 7 inch card is I'll line it up so that I get a cut at 7 inches along the longest edge of the card or the cardstock. This is 11.5 by 8.5 by 11 inch, and then I will score it at 5 inches, fold it, and then cut off the overhanging piece so I don't actually have to, measure out 10 and then cut that and so on and so forth. Just because the ruler on my cutting machine is one that you have to pull out, and it just becomes a bit of a hassle. So now I'll go ahead and put together the card. I've got the faux watercolor panel that I've adhered to the card base. As you can see, I've got that small little border around the edge. Now I'm attaching that hexagon panel with some foam. So I cut out a piece of foam, attached to the back, and adhered it. And then I've got all those little sprigs that we had put together. I'm just going to arrange them, few at the top left and a couple at the bottom right, just to surround the sentiment and draw your eye in. If you wanted, you could have left it without these little sprigs, but to me, I don't know, I felt like it wasn't finished, so I decided to add them. But I'm sure that if you just added some gems, you would have been good without adding these. So I'm just adding them in whichever way that I feel looks nice. I did cut out another little leaf to add because I felt like all of those overlapping bits of the branches just kind of looked a bit messy, so I wanted to cover it up a little bit. And then I had some extra bits that I'm adding to the inside of the card. So I always like to kind of match my friend to the inside. And when I'm doing die cutting, I always cut out extra pieces to do this. Now I'm also going to add a couple sentiments on the inside from the stamp set. One of them is Autumn Blessings. And what I'll do is set that up in my stamping platform. Now I set it up in my stamping platform, but forgot I have all that dimension on the front with that fun foam that I added to the sentiment panel. So I actually had to opt for using an acrylic block and doing the stamping by hand. So I'm just using some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink here, and I'm stamping out the Autumn Blessings. And I realized that the stamp wasn't completely done properly. Sorry, my head gets in the way here, but I had to double stamp it and kind of see through my acrylic block to make sure that I'm not creating like a halo. And then I grabbed the Thank You for All You Do stamp as well and stamped that just under it. So that is the inside of my card. Now moving on to my favorite part, embellishments. Now Scrappy Tails has two card kits available right now. One is Halloween themed and another one is sunflower themed. And the sunflower themed one, which is the Harvest Blessings Deluxe card kit, has those beautiful yellow pearl embellishments. And they're actually a really nice bag of embellishments because you not only get a large variety of sizes, there's really small ones and really big pearls. You also get two types of pearls. There's a matte kind of satin finish, and then there's also kind of a shiny iridescent finish to the pearls. So be careful when you are using them. If you want to use all of one type of finish, there are two types. So you can see that I also added some clear gems to the center panel because I thought those would stand out a little bit more and add a bit of shine. And then I added the pearls around the background. And that was pretty much my card, along with adding a few of the smaller pearls to the inside around that little foliage or a leafy bit that I added in the bottom left. So there you have it. You can use your dies and cut some foam out of fun foam with them to create your own stamps. And that not only helps you create very distinct and different looking projects, but it helps you stretch the use of your dies. So I hope that you've been inspired to use anything from this video for your crafting purposes, and go ahead and check out the Scrappy Tails website and their recent release. All of the products that I've used are linked in my blog, looking at the description below. Also, the Scrappy Tails link is in my description below. I hope you guys all have a great day, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!